Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today, we're going to have a little fun. We're going to talk about some of our most controversial musical opinions.
Yay.
There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. So I thought this would be kind of a fun topic to kind of talk about, because we both have some, I guess, probably pretty controversial opinions.
Amongst, I mean, controversial to some. Some might go, oh yeah, but generally speaking, I think some of these are going to be like, whoo, shocking.
I'm sure some of them probably are, but I'm sure some of them probably really aren't that controversial. The first one I've got is, I think AC/DC was better off with Bon Scott. I think they were a better band back then. I think they released better albums back then. The rumors are that Back in Black was largely written before his death, or at least it had partially been written before his death, and then maybe that's why he was still, closer to those earlier albums than what came after.
It's hard to say. I don't know what kind of contribution Bon Scott made outside of singing. I don't know if he was the lyricist or if he really was involved in the music part of it. I don't know what his involvement was in that. I think there was a purity to the Bon Scott era that may have disappeared with the later albums with Brian Jones.
Johnson.
I'm sorry, yeah. Brian Johnson. Which, I mean, he's a great singer, and they made some good music, but I think, like I said, I think there was a purity to the early AC/DC stuff, and in my opinion, and here's a controversial opinion if you want one, I think AC/DC is just a glorified bar band anyway, in general.
I mean, with a lot of their career, I can kind of see that. I mean, I really only like a small handful of their albums.
Right. But I would say that a lot of the Brian Johnson stuff was really musically just trying to harken back to the Bon Scott stuff anyway. So the purity was more there with Bon Scott.
I got two that are kind of related, and I'm sure there's one of them is probably not really all that controversial. The other one probably is. The first one is, I think largely Eddie Van Halen was kind of an overrated guitarist. He was at the very beginning of his career, he was, doing things that no one else was doing, creating all new guitar styles. I get it in the early part of his career, did a lot of great stuff, like I said, stuff that no one else was doing. Then after the first couple of Van Halen albums,
he kind of plateaued early.
I think so,
And that could have just been, it could have been how the industry was going and what was popular. I don't know, but I definitely agree that he probably plateaued early, at least in public, on records and stuff. Whether or not he could have done way better, it's hard to say.
I know a lot of people put Eddie Van Halen up as the greatest guitarist ever. I think he's a good guitarist. I'd probably put him in the top 20, maybe top 25.
I would say Prince is a much better guitarist.
I would completely agree with that. My second part to that is I think the David Lee Roth era of Van Halen is hands down better than the Van Hagar stuff. I mean, the Van Hagar albums are okay. I think, especially with those first, 3 or 4.
Well, there's only 4.
Well, I know there's only 4. That's why I said 3 or 4.
Right.
Because one of the first 4 albums is kind of iffy, but the first 4 albums from Van Halen are I think hands down better than anything else.
Yeah, Oh You Get One Too is not a good album.
Yeah,
but I'm in the other camp. But I think I could be wrong. But my experience has always been when I say I like the Hagar era better, I've had people threaten to kill me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's necessarily controversial, but I'm sure it's controversial amongst some. Even me as a Hagar fan, I wouldn't say it's controversial to me, just because like I said, I think it's the other way around. But
I would say probably a majority of the people like that, and that's why I said it's probably not that controversial.
I think musically, the Hagar stuff was better, but again, maybe if you're talking like purity of rock and experimentation, there's probably, you could argue that the David Lee Roth era was better.
Yeah.
But I don't think that had anything to do with David Lee Roth.
Probably not, but
so because he's a great frontman.
Those are definitely the most popular. If you go on like Spotify, Apple Music, whatever, the David Lee Roth stuff is always the most popular choices.
Right. That's what I mean, though. That's why I don't think it's controversial to say his era is better. But I think that it's one of those things where it may not be a 50-50 split, but there's definitely people are in one camp or the other.
Yeah.
To go with to go with your Eddie Van Halen thing, I'm going to say it. Eric Clapton's not a great guitar player. He's a good guitar player, but he's not a great guitar player.
I can't really argue with you there. I mean,
like I'll mention Prince. Prince could run rings around Eric Clapton even when Eric Clapton was at his peak.
Yeah.
And I would say Prince, not at his peak, could do that.
I think there's a couple of songs here or there across Eric Clapton's career that has helped build up that reputation of being a great guitarist. But if you listen to 98% of his songs, it's just not there.
It's not. I mean, Layla's it's good song.
I think
at least the first 2/3 of the song.
I think Layla is probably the best song he ever did. But
up until the end.
I like the end of it.
I
Also.
hate the ending.
I know you do.
It goes on and on. It just won't freaking end. And in Cream, with his work with Cream is good. I would even say it's exceptional, but it's not. It doesn't. I don't think it puts Eric Clapton in this higher echelon of guitarists.
I'll agree with you.
Yeah, it's not that great.
Something that's probably controversial just to fans of vinyl records. I think more times than not, you get a better sound out of CDs than you really do vinyl. With CDs, at least it's more of a consistent sound.
Consistent, yeah. There's no degradation, so that's whereas you'll get degradation over time with vinyl.
And I think that vinyl compared to CDs, of course, price-wise, it's a fraction of what you're paying for vinyl records.
Which is why I've been buying mostly CDs lately.
And really, if you want to listen to CDs, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to get into. You can buy a good CD player and speakers for $100. If you want to listen to records, you're going to spend a minimum $500 or $600 for a turntable and a
if
receiver
you want the
and speakers to have a good sounding system.
Because you can get the cheap all-in-ones things, and some of them are decent if they've got the right
actually,
cartridge.
There's an all-in-one right behind you that I actually reviewed on the channel. It actually sounds pretty decent.
Yeah, if you've got the right stylus and cartridge, it'll be okay. But you're right. You can get a decent CD player cheap.
Yeah.
And for me, it's because I like to listen to music mobile, and I've really started to completely dislike streaming services because the music quality, the sound quality is not there.
Horrible.
So for me, CDs present an option. I do have a CD player in my car. A lot of people don't these days.
Yeah. I won't own a car without one because that's where I listen to most of my CDs at.
But I'm okay with it because I can
digitize
them at full wave file, so they're lossless, and I can listen to them through my USB drive.
Yeah.
Or on my phone, which I'm moving away from that too because I notice the programs on the phone compress it too. So if you go going straight USB into the system works better to get the full lossless quality. Yeah. But that's what I mean with CDs. You get that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be consistent and it's slightly more portable. So
sticking with the whole vinyl record theme, I would say that I think nostalgia largely drives and has driven the vinyl revival over the last 15 years. Even with me. It's definitely, like I said before, I think I get a better sound out of CDs, especially when you're getting into some of the higher end CDs that are available out there on the market. It's that nostalgia that really brings people back to vinyl records, music that they listened to in their youth, and the whole tangible format, the big artwork and everything that we've grown up and loved. I think it's largely what drives people back to vinyl records.
Yeah, and I would agree with that because it's true for me as well. Where I don't know about that is how it applies to the younger people who have gotten into vinyl. But then again, you could argue that that's kind of their way of trying to grab onto that past that they may not necessarily have grown up with, but at least on some level can relate to.
Yeah.
So this is going to be very controversial in this room. I do like Pink Floyd, but I think they're a pretentious art rock band that isn't great. I wouldn't say they're bad. They're good music, and I get why people like them. I really do. But again, it's one of those situations. Dark Side of the Moon is a great album. Is it so great that it sells bigger than most other albums? No, I don't see it.
And actually, it really doesn't. I want to say it's in the top 20 for highest selling albums,
And
but
I just don't
think
know why
it's
it
low
should
in the. I want to say it's like 15. I think it's like 18th now or something like that.
Well,
So I mean,
yeah, I mean that's because Taylor Swift is selling so many records.
she's not even above any of those.
Right.
But, okay.
Yet she will be eventually. But so I've tried to figure out how like an album like Dark Side of the Moon, which again is a good album. There's great songs on it. I like the album. I listen to it about once or twice a year. And that's a lot because there's a lot of albums I like even more that I don't listen to that much. But I tried to think about what makes this the best-selling album. And the only thing I can come up with is that people get so stoned when they're listening to it, they leave it places, or they loan it to their friends and forget they loaned it to them. And then they have to go out and buy another copy.
I'm sure there probably was a lot of times where people would like let other people borrow a record and didn't get it back.
On top of that, of course, there's like 50 bajillion reissues and pressings of it. Nick owns half of those.
No, I don't. I've only
quarter of them.
I got like 9 copies. That's it.
9 copies of one album.
Yeah,
that is good, but not great.
I think I've got. I probably have 6 or 7 different copies of Appetite for Destruction, also.
And I would say that's a better album.
I wouldn't say that.
I would say Appetite for Destruction is a better album than Dark Side.
I think it's probably in my top 5.
I mean, that's for how do you I like that for controversy? Appetite for Destruction versus Dark Side of the Moon. But yeah, I just think Pink Floyd in general. I get it. I get why people like them. They are fantastic musicians, no question. They have good songs, but I just don't think they're up there the way that people think they are.
I don't think a lot of people really rate them all that high.
They come in like number 1 or 2 in a lot of progressive rock,
which is funny because they're not even really like progressive rock.
And I agree with that. They kind of fall into that art rock category. I mean, some of their stuff is progressive. There's no question. They have some progressive rock.
Lot of bands, most bands in the 70s, did stuff that had progressive elements to it.
But yeah, if you go online and look at all the progressive rock lists, they're in there, and they're always in the top 10, and sometimes more times than not, they're in the top 5.
Yeah, they should
and they shouldn't be.
Piggybacking your whole Pink Floyd thing, I think Kiss is the most overrated band.
Yay, we're friends again because we both agree on that one.
I think they've got one good album and a sprinkling of decent songs across their career, and that's about it.
And I would say that what you think is their good album is a good album. It's an album I can listen to. But if I had to pick a Kiss album that I like, it's Revenge. It's not Destroyer.
Yeah.
But maybe just because it was the first Kiss album I owned, and because I bought it when it first came out. I don't know. But yeah, they're totally overrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of them are overrated as human beings too. To be completely honest with you, 2 of them specifically.
I probably wouldn't argue with you on that one.
But yeah, I totally agree. We're friends again.
Sticking with bands, though, I'm kind of the same way with Rush. I think Rush is musically a good band. But
we're enemies again.
Geddy Lee's voice is just horrible. And that's what stops me from listening to Rush.
I don't think his voice is horrible. I agree. I'm not a big fan of high-pitched singing. There's exceptions. Axl Rose would be an exception. Ozzy's an exception. Bruce Dickinson is an exception. But I've noticed that Bruce Dickinson, and specifically him and Geddy Lee, I think their voices work better in the music now that they're older because their voices have deepened from age. And it tends, just for my ears, it does work better that way. So I get that part of it. But I don't think he's a bad singer. I just don't like the high pitched singing. And I bet you I could find some songs that you've probably never heard before that you'd be like, all right, I get it. You know, you could
probably
see it.
Not.
You never know, but you know, there's a few songs.
Maybe I will say that I've really only listened to like the early Rush stuff.
Yeah,
I haven't listened to their last couple of albums.
Right. Well, Clockwork Angels was their last album, and that's a great album. And his voice is, like I said, because he's older, it's a little deeper.
I doubt I still.
I don't know. I think you would like it, but
probably not.
You never know. Yeah. Now this one, I'm not sure how controversial it is because I know everyone has their own Beatle, but I would say that musically, George Harrison's solo career is infinitely better than Paul McCartney's solo career. And I think,
I can agree with
and
that.
I would go as far as to say that all the songs that George Harrison wrote with the Beatles are still a lot better than, not all, but some of the Paul McCartney stuff that he wrote for the Beatles.
I'll say that I think George Harrison's solo career showed that he should have been more involved in the Beatles.
And if you look at the songs he wrote for the Beatles, I mean, if you were to take just those songs and make a compilation album out of them, I would say that's a great Beatles album. That could blow most of their albums out of the water. Because I think George's songs even with the Beatles were,
he was
some
definitely
of the best songs.
Definitely underrated.
Yeah.
And sticking with the Beatles, I think Ringo. People like to hate on Ringo and talk about how he really wasn't a good drummer. He was more of he was definitely kind of a simpler drummer. Just from the outside looking at it, he looks simple the way he drums. But if you actually dig into his drumming style, it was actually a little more complex than people really give him credit for. He's really an underrated drummer. I think he was the perfect fit for that band, and the Beatles would not have been as big as they were had it not been for Ringo.
I agree. I won't disagree with that. And I would say even his solo career has produced some pretty nice music, some hidden gems. No, I really think I don't think people really give him credit for his solo stuff. A lot of his solo stuff isn't bad.
And then the last one, I don't know how controversial this is. I think for the most part, music genres are just kind of dumb and unnecessary, especially in 2023. I mean, there's so much blending, and there really has been, even back to the 70s. A lot of bands blended so many different genres in their music. I mean,
by the time you got to the end of the 20th century, there really shouldn't be genres, really.
No, I mean, and genres are what? A product of the industry, really. I mean, because fans, they don't really care what the genre is, whether it's progressive rock or grunge or alternative or punk. They just want to listen to good music.
Right.
So I think genres are really unnecessary.
Yeah, I think there's, in terms of like giving something a small categorization, like for a record store to be able to separate, make things easier for our people to find their artists. I guess
because you couldn't just list things alphabetically.
Well, you could, but I mean, if you blended, so instead of having 3 rows of rock and 3 rows of hip hop, and you put them all together, now you got 6 rows of things that you have to go through, and you're going through much more to find. But then again, there's benefits to that too, because you might see something that you wouldn't have otherwise seen and gone, oh, what is that? And
exactly.
Now you've got your new favorite band or new favorite artist.
Yeah.
So I guess there's arguments to be made to both sides of it, but I totally agree. It just gets to a point where it's so almost becomes difficult to categorize some artists into their subgenres.
Yeah. Well, that's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know what some of your favorite, most controversial music opinions are.
Or yell at us for ours, I guess.
I got more than just the ones I picked today. But let us know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.